Hi, this is Sue for Parkinson Me, my journey with Parkinson's. So today I have titled this podcast When We Were Young, and that's been inspired by a conversation that I had with my husband and conversations I've had with others of similar age recently. We started talking about the things that we used to do when we were children, and we both felt that we really did have it quite good when we were kids. We made our own fun. We were always out there on our bikes or paddling in the river or catching tadpoles, watching them grow into frogs and then releasing them, picking blackberries in the bush, and we would be gone from first thing in the morning till we were just home for dinner, and we'd take some jam sandwiches with us and some apples and some cordial, and we'd be as happy as Larry. And we had so much freedom, and it was only now that you can start to appreciate how much freedom we actually had. And we were comparing ourselves to children these days. They have got so many devices and electronic doodads. That's how they amuse themselves. And if they haven't got them, then they seem to be easily bored. I don't remember ever really being bored when we were kids. We just got out and made our own fun. Now, I grew up in Rotorua. I was there from the time I was 5 till I was about 18. And I used to regularly walk from my home to the skating rink, which was a long walk. It probably took me, at least an hour or more to get there. Then we'd skate around for about 3 hours, then I'd walk home. And it never would have occurred to me to ask my mum or my dad, or anybody else for that matter, to pick me up and take me where I wanted to go. It was just taken as read that if I wanted to go somewhere, I organised it and I did it for myself. And I did that from the time I can't remember what time it would have been, but when I was younger I would be accompanied by my big brothers, so I probably was out and about and doing various things right from the time I was about 5 or so, but in the company of my brothers. Then as I got older, I just did it for myself. And we would do crazy things. I could bike to my friends' houses, we'd pick everybody up on the way, and then we'd bike out to Hamarana Springs, which is a place in Rotorua, and we would hire kayaks and play around on the kayaks and go for bushwalks, and then we'd get on our bikes and ride around the lake and then ride home. Hours and hours of just activity, and we had a great time. I was working by the time I was 16, and that's a whole nother story. I ended up flatting with a friend at 16, and I was saying to my husband today, I don't know how we managed to sign up a lease as 16-year-olds to rent a flat. I know I didn't get my parents' approval or signatures on any documents because they were overseas when I decamped from my home, from my childhood home, and went into a flat with my friend. That is it. There's a whole other story. I was working, I had a good job, I considered myself an adult, I paid my own bills, and I went flatting. I said when I was 16, when Mum and Dad were overseas, I paid my own rent, I bought my own food, I did all of that, and I cannot imagine a 16-year-old today having the ability and the maturity to be able to do that. And I'm not saying I didn't make some mistakes. Of course I did. I was 16 years of age, and sometimes things get on top of you, tough it out and you get over these things. We had so much more freedom. One of the things that we used to like to do was walking over the fields and going blackberry picking, and that was always fun. And Mum would furnish us with some ice cream containers, and we would go and pick blackberries. We'd eat some, we'd pick some, we'd bring some home to Mum, and then she would make blackberry jam for us, which was absolutely gorgeous. And I never appreciated how lucky we were to have that freedom to roam over the fields and go picking berries and playing in the fields. But I think with Mum, she had 4 children, and it was to give her some peace and quiet. It was one of the reasons why she used to let us do that. But the world felt like a safer place at that time. It really did. It felt like a safer place. And I wouldn't like to think of my 16-year-old grandchildren out there on their own, flatting, whether they would be safe or not. I shudder to think. One of the things that I've noticed, when I had my second marriage, I inherited two stepsons, and one lived with us for a time, and he was 15, 16, and he had an appointment. It was either an appointment at his GP, and he said to me, I've got an appointment at the doctor's this morning at 11 o'clock, and I said, oh, that's fine, thanks for telling me. And he stood there expectantly, and I looked at him and said, is there a problem? And he said, "Are you going to take me?" And I looked at him and I said, "If you were my child, I'd say it's not far to walk, you can walk." And he said, "You expect me to walk to the doctor's?" And I went, "Yeah, what's wrong with that?" And he got in a right huff, and I think he even might have gone to his mother, walked to his mother's, which he probably could have walked to the GP, which wasn't much different in distance. He walked to his mother so that she could take him to the doctor's, which I thought was ridiculous. I was always brought up to be independent, and I brought my children up the same. But I would have had no expectation that my parents run me around. I used to play hockey when I was a girl, and I got there on my bike. I put my hockey stick on my holder on my bike, put my other gear in my saddlebags, and off I would go. I got myself to school from quite an early age. I used to bike or walk to school, and it was quite a distance. I was quite self-sufficient when it came to getting myself places. And I enjoyed the journey to school. Riding my bike, there's a sense of freedom and control that I could get myself to school and back. It was quite enjoyable. I didn't need to be dropped off by my mum. I was being independent and doing my own thing. The other thing I thought about was when we were young, I said to my husband the other day, I said, this kind of dates us, and the kids will think that we're really old. When we were growing up, there were no microwaves. The kids would probably be astounded that we didn't have microwaves back in the day when we were kids. They just hadn't been invented, as far as I know. I mean, there's a number of things we didn't have. We didn't have computers. We didn't have cell phones. As I say all these things, I'm really aware of some things that my parents would have said to me about what they didn't, about what my parent. I think about my parents when they used to say to me that they didn't have this or that, they didn't have a television. Television wasn't invented. They didn't have a radio that has sing-alongs around the piano and all those sorts of things. And you think, God, that makes them sound so old. And they didn't have such a thing as a microwave oven. And actually, I found a new use for the microwave oven recently. I was getting ready to go out one day, and my husband was asleep in bed, and I wanted to dry some socks that I wanted to wear that day. So I actually found these little socks, and they were only light, and they were washed. They were very clean, but they were damp. So I put them in the microwave, gave them a few 3-minute bursts, and they came out dry. So my husband was shaking his head and thought I was a right nutter. No, you just make things up, you just figure things out, and microwaving my socks worked. And he went, ew, you've got to put food in that microwave. And I said, I wouldn't put horrible smelly socks in there. They were freshly out of the wash, so they were perfectly okay. But I thought I was using my noodle. I thought I was using my brain and my initiative. And I had nice warm microwave socks to put on. When we were young, what else didn't we have? I know when we were young, we had more respect for those elders that we came in contact with, whether they were neighbours, whether they were family, whether they were friends, the parents of children that we knew. We always treated them with respect. And I remember sometimes if you'd been somewhere like at school or something like that, and you'd played up, and they said, if you don't behave yourself, I'm going to call your mother. And that would be enough to scare you into submission. The thought of your mother being contacted by the school because you hadn't been behaving yourself. And there probably isn't any of that going on these days. I also remember when we were growing up, you played a game and some people won and some people lost. And these days people seem to be a little bit weary or scared of, I don't quite know how to put it, but it doesn't seem to be the done thing for a child to lose a race. Now, I know for myself, having children, if they lose something that they really wanted to win, it would make them work harder so that they might have more chance of being successful the next time. If there is no such thing as losing at a game, then what incentive do you have to apply yourself and be able to get ahead in life? There's got to be some that come out on top, there's got to be some that have to work a little harder, and there's got to be some who just don't make the grade and have to change the direction that they're heading in, perhaps. When we were young, there was winners, there was losers, there were people that were top of the class and they were celebrated, and there were people who struggled and maybe they didn't get the help they needed. There were quite a few changes from when we were young, but I do think you look back with fondness on your lives, don't you? And I really did have a good childhood, and I thank my mum and dad for that, and I thank my brothers for that. We did have fun when we were kids. We fought like anybody did, but you knew you were loved. You felt safe at home, and that's worth all the money in the world. And I was thinking, when it comes to Parkinson's, that is a fight in itself. And I think the fact that we have had to stand on our own 2 feet, that we have had to try really hard, and we've gone through adversity in our lives because we weren't overly protected, that we're expected to stand on our own 2 feet and make some decisions from a reasonably early age, and you just didn't give up. You just got on and tried your best to get somewhere in life. And I think having that expectation and having that expectation of yourself, that if you come to something that's hard, if you come to a fork in the road where it's tough to carry on, and you've had to pick yourself up and dust yourself off and get on with life, I think that builds the resilience that you really do need when you're dealing with Parkinson's or any age-related conditions, anything that affects you long term. I think having built that resilience as you were growing up, having to have the ability to get on with and do things for yourself would stand you in good stead for having Parkinson's, because you can't be to my mind, you can't be somebody who gives up easily if you have something like Parkinson's. You have to fight the good fight and show it who's boss, and get on with life and enjoy life and not let it bring you down as much as possible. So this has been Sue for Parkinson Me, My Journey with Parkinson's. Kia kaha, be brave, be bold, be you.